Good day, everyone. My name is Vincent Tsagai. Welcome to Mabatu Palms. I hope everybody is settled, feeling at ease, because this is a nice place to be actually. From the surveillance department, security. So what I'm here about is your safety in terms of if there's anything that can happen today, because we never know. So for example, if there can be fire in this room here, we have 4 of our fire extinguishers in every corner of this room. Another way is using this door through straight to the glass door outside to the parking. That's where one of our emergency point is. For toilets, you go up the steps, you pass the smaller tuck shop, you turn left, there's 2 toilets. On your right, it's ladies' toilet, on your left, it's men's toilet. I'm just hoping everybody will enjoy today. From my side, that's all. Your safety is our concern. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vincent. I hope you did not mean the surveillance in the manner that, in the way that my work is involved, because this universities, this place will be in trouble if you're going to do a surveillance without telling us and without our consent. So I'm hoping that you are using the term quite loosely, isn't it? Okay, because I'm on duty all the time. I can fine you, you know. Have you heard about the information regulator? I'm on duty wherever I am. I'm always on duty. And I see people taking photos. And I'm not sure if we have consented, Vice Chancellor, to our photos being taken. I didn't see a consent form. That's on a lighter note. Can we please switch off our cell phones? Because I'll call you out if your phone rings. My name is Pensi Tlakula, and I am your program director for today. The principal and vice chancellor of the Northwest University, Professor Mzubanzi Bismarck Kyobeka, our guest of honor, Professor Mukoni John William Makhene, the former Vice Chancellor of the then University of Bophuthatswana, and now the University of the Northwest, and his distinguished family. Esteemed Vice Chancellors, if they're here, former Vice Chancellors of UNIBO, if they're here, and former staff members, former professors. I've seen quite a number. Professor Taule is here. I saw Professor Dema, Professor Tiba, and I don't know who else. You know, it's not my intention to mention everyone, just that I'm so excited. This is such a good reunion for all of us to be in this room this afternoon, because we haven't been together. I saw staff members, people that we were together at the law school. I saw Professor Balatseng, so Tsepiso Rampele. It's so good to see all of you. Members of the Northwest Provincial Government, if they're here today, if there are any members of the Diplomatic Corps and traditional leaders, and the members of the planning team, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Professor, let me start with Dr. Makhene, because he led us in this respect. Professor Simeon Taule, Professor Neo Matabe, I didn't mention her. She was also one of the first professors and Deputy Vice Chancellor, I think, of the then UNIBO, and we have our Speakers as well as Dr. Dr. Matapelo Motsi, Professor Sipho Siepe. Interesting stories will also come up about Dr. Siepe. Members of the University Council, the Management Committee and Senior Management of the University, deans, deputy deans, directors, leadership of the university, the alumni and former colleagues of Professor Makhene, some of them have already mentioned them, members of the Northwest Student Leadership, esteemed members of the media fraternity present today, I welcome you this afternoon. I think we're nearing the afternoon. And as I said, I'm going to be your program director today, and I don't intend to make a speech because that's not why I am here. But it does give me great pleasure to welcome all of you to this auspicious occasion, which is the colloquium to celebrate Professor Mokone John Makhene, one of the founding VCs, Vice Chancellors of the then UNIBO and now the University of the Northwest. On the 1st of March, 2025, Dr. Khotso Mokhele, Professor Simeon Taul and I had the honor and privilege of being invited by Professor Makhene's family to attend and speak at his 90th birthday. And the three of us were sitting on the same table, and I happened to sit next to Dr. Khotso Mokhele. And during the many conversations that we had on that wonderful occasion, Dr. Mokhele lamented the fact that Professor Makhene had contributed a lot to higher education in this country, but his contribution had not been acknowledged and celebrated. And then he then undertook to call me after the birthday so that we can talk about what is it that we could do to honor and celebrate Professor Makhene. And indeed, a few weeks later, he then called me and then proposed that we should consider organizing a colloquium to honor Professor Makhene. And at that time, he had already broached the subject with the Vice Chancellor of Northwest University, Professor Kyobeka, and who also agreed instantly that he can host that kind of occasion. And that's how the organizing team came together. And Khotso, I'm going to call you Khotso, thank you so much for birthing the idea of honoring Professor Makhene in such a befitting manner, because had it not been of you, we would not be here today. I also want to express our profound gratitude to Professor Kyobeka for just agreeing instantly to host this occasion and to give us a team from the university to work with us. And you know, where we are in our country, we have become very pedestrian and we don't pay attention to detail. Our levels of efficiency are very, very low. But let me tell you something. Professor Kyobeka, the people that you gave us under the leadership of Ngwaku Manuku, with Lester Mpulukeng, Litlotlo Lebeko, and Gosnati Tom, they made us so proud to be South African. I mean, to pull off this occasion from, it was when we started the conversation, it must have been May, in earnest, June. And we are now in October. And these people are they have their full-time employment at the university, you know, and they just came on board. And I want us to give them a big round of applause. It was such a pleasure to work with you, and your level of efficiency and paying attention to detail. That's what we need in this country, for young people to really, if we can get more young people like you, we'll go far. So thank you very much. Professor Makhene, Abut Mokone, thank you so much to you and your family for for allowing us to honor you in this manner. You could have said no, but you agreed and you traveled all the way to Mafikeng for this occasion. We are deeply indebted to you and your family, and thank you so much, fam, for agreeing. Let's also give the family a round of applause. As I said, I'm not here to make a speech, but I'm going to say that I owe everything that I am today to you, Professor Makhene, because had I not been given the opportunity to be part of UNIBO, of the law school at that time, I probably would not have achieved many of the things that I was privileged to achieve. Many important South Africans passed through your hands. The late professor, the late Judge Yvonne Mokhoro, who was the first woman judge of the Constitutional Court at the dawn of democracy in 1994. She was a student at this university. We have Professor Siepe here. I don't know how many of you know the head of the SIU, Advocate Andy Mutibi, is a student of this university, actually. I taught him at the law school. Advocate Vusma Donsela, who's leading our team at The Hague, you might have seen him during the ICJ case as our ambassador at The Hague. He's a student of this university. We taught him at the law school. There are many others. The late Justice Vivian Tlapi that I had invited to this occasion, and she passed just last month, was also a student of this university. I think also the former Vice Chancellor of UCT, Sipho, if I'm not mistaken, Makhene Pakeng, she was a student of this university. And I see my big sister coming in, Ms. Joyce Piliso Siroke, the former chairperson of the Commission on Gender Equality. You are welcome. I see you are with there. Yeah, thank you very much. So that's where we are, and without a waste of time, having done the dispense with those formalities, before I welcome Professor Kyobeka to welcome us and give his welcome address, there's a video that's supposed to be played, and immediately after the video, Prof, I won't call you, can you please come to the stage to welcome us. Thank you very much.
So the video decided to expose us. Apologies for that, it will be played. Program Director, Advocate Pensi Tlakula, thank you for the very kind words of introduction. group's work form the foundation on which the sector continues to build and grow. We are privileged and honored to have one of those giants with us today. Professor John William Makhene is a giant in the higher education landscape, a scholar of distinction, and a leader of courage. He remains a pioneer and a leader who transformed obstacles into pathways, enabling all of us to advance and prosper. Today's occasion is a rare privilege. It is not often that we have the opportunity to celebrate and honor those whose contribution have altered the course of history in their lifetime. Therefore, we are immensely blessed and proud to host this event to celebrate Professor Makhene, a pathfinder, a builder, a leader, and an inspiration. He established a community of learning, a vanguard of intellectual courage, and a sanctuary for generations of students hungry for knowledge and for dignity. At a time when the context was fraught with difficulty, he stood firm, declaring through his leadership and wisdom, that education would remain the light that no shadow could extinguish. The late former President Nelson Mandela once declared, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Professor Makhene armed countless young people with this weapon, equipping them to change their families, their communities, and this country. His leadership was and is still visible in the thousands of lives he touched and the institution he built. As you look around this hall, you will see giants who stand as living testimony to Prof's vision and leadership. We are indeed blessed to be in their company, and even more so still walk alongside the men who shaped them. For the Northwest University, Professor Makhene's influence is not only a matter of memory, it is a living inheritance. Archbishop Tutu once remarked that we are made for goodness, we are made for love, and we are made for togetherness, close quote. I believe that it was that spirit that inspired Professor Makhene's leadership. He saw the university as family, bound together in pursuit of truth, justice, and progress. That vision continues to bind us today, compelling us to press forward and carry his legacy. So therefore, colleagues, this colloquium is both a tribute and a renewal. A tribute because we give thanks for the extraordinary leadership and scholarship of Professor Makhene. A renewal because he sat before us. To you, Professor Makhene, we say thank you. Thank you for your vision, your courage to ask you to organize the university's calendar in its entirety. To the Makhene family, we extend our gratitude for sharing your father, your sibling, your relative with us and with South Africa and the rest of the world. His work has blessed this institution and our country beyond measure. To Dr. Mokhele, our deepest gratitude for planting the seed. You have shown the measure of true leadership. And we thank you sincerely for your heart and for your vision. Now, some people may not know that when I was a student leader in this university many years ago, I sat at the University Council in my capacity as the president of the SRC with Professor Makhene, Professor Melvin Mbao, Dr. Pensi Tlakula, the late Judge Yvonne Mokoro, the late Moruti John Tau, and the late Dr. Maybe Professor Makhene will decide to share in the evening session about those very tumultuous years. And how dare I forget Professor Takatso Mofokeng, who is not with us today, who at that time was the Vice Chancellor. Distinguished guests, let us embrace this day as an invitation to continue the work that Prof began. Let us be bold in scholarship, ethical in leadership, and committed to service to society. On behalf of the Northwest University, I welcome you all. May this colloquium inspire us to build upon it with renewed courage and purpose. Kia leboga. Thank you. Ngiyabonga.
At the Northwest University's Makhene campus, our facilities are transforming to support world-class teaching, research, and student life. In 2025, construction began on new lecture halls in Building A2A, a 72 million rand project that will provide additional state-of-the-art teaching spaces. Alongside this, a brand new laboratory complex for geography and life sciences, valued at over 52 million rand, is taking shape, ensuring our Faculty of Education has the tools to prepare the scientists and educators of tomorrow. Our students are already benefiting from major upgrades. The Lost City residences have been modernized, while the Community Law Center now occupies a brand new space, giving our law students a professional environment to sharpen their skills. Sustainability is at the heart of the Makhene campus. A 1,000 kilowatt solar power system is being installed across rooftops and carports. In 2024 alone, the campus generated over 46,000 kilowatt hours of clean energy, cutting costs and reducing our carbon footprint. Essential services are being future-proofed with a 67 million rand upgrade of water systems, new emergency generators, and energy-efficient installations. The Makhene campus is building resilience against future challenges. From modern lecture halls and cutting-edge laboratories to sustainable energy and revitalized residences, the Northwest University's Makhene campus is investing in facilities that empower excellence. This is more than infrastructure. This is the future. Built today, it all starts here.
This is so impressive, completely unrecognizable, you know, from the days when we were at the university teaching there. Can we really give Professor and his team a round of applause? Indeed, even in times of adversity, a university can stand as a beacon of hope. And those were powerful words. And UNIBO was established during a very difficult time in the history of our country. But it remained a beacon of hope. And in those days, Professor Gyobeka, at some point I was the chair of council of the university. And the SRC, as it was then called, interrupted the meeting of council and marched me and my colleagues who were members of council to the Great Hall because there was a student protest about one thing or the other. You know, there were always student protests those days. I remember there was a young man who actually stood on the table facing me and said, "You're going to lead this march to the Great Hall to address the students." But they were still quite respectful those days. They didn't call us names. And these days, young people call, you know, older persons names. And it's something that we need to deal with in this country. Professor Makhene had many facets of his professional life. As Dr. Makhele told us, he has the St. Peter's life. I don't know if there's no one here who was at St. Peter's. I don't even think Sis Joyce Piliso was. He was Kilnerton, she says. And St. Peter's, there were, I think, Archbishop Desmond Dudu, Mr. Walter Cingo, who's also passed, and later the likes. I don't know whether in your time, Father Norman Monjan, whether he was there, I think. And later there was Hugh Masekela and those who came after him, and that's the great history of St. Peter's. And then he was also an academic at Fort Hare before he came to UNIBO. And one of his proteges from Fort Hare, Dr. Matapelo Motsi, is going to tell us about the Fort Hare days and how you encountered Professor Makhene. Can we give a round of applause, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to greet the family, Professor Makhene and family, honored guests, student leaders, Dikgosi tsa rona ke sa di lebale, guests of honors. I'm very happy to be one of the speakers today because Abu Joni is my brother. But I have to say something about him because I was not very close to Abu Joni. I was even closer to Ostoko, the late Ostoko, than Abu Joni, because he was always busy behind the desk, reading this, reading that. I'm going to the office, in and out. I'm doing so. Yeah, now we never used to have speeches, Madam Chair. But I would like to talk about a giant academic who reached 90, still walking upright on his feet. Good morning to Professor Makhene and the family, the Vice Chancellor of the Northwest University, Professor Bismarck Jobeka, all distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, and family. My name is Dr. Matapelo Motsi, and I am honored to have been asked to be part of this wonderful colloquium in honor of Prof. Makhene. I carry with me both fond memories and deep gratitude for his contribution to my life and career to date. I still remember vividly the discipline and excellence. Those qualities have not left him And it is inspiring to witness that same consistency to this date. The early 1970s were not an easy period in South Africa. The political climate was tense, particularly following the banishment of Steve Biko to his hometown in Bishop. Those were the periods that I was at Fort Hare. When Steve Biko was banished from Natal University to his hometown, Bishop. Fort Hare, by its very nature, became a center of political unrest and a meeting ground for student unions from across the country, which means every weekend there would be what we call a Gumba. If you are a student at a university, they would tell you what Gumbas are. We didn't know about Gumbas. Only to find that it was a meeting place for these politicians to come together and discuss whatever nitty-gritties they have to do. So Fort Hare, by its very nature, became a center of political unrest and a meeting ground for student unions from all across the country. We were young, then fresh from high school. Many of us from missionary backgrounds. We attended missionary high schools, so we didn't know anything about politics. Missionary backgrounds and inexperience in the ways the political struggle going on. It was that moment of uncertainty amidst the confusion and turbulence that Professor Makhene became more than a lecturer to us. He was a mentor, a guide, and a steady hand who helped us navigate not only our academics, but also the wider challenges of life. I'd like to say something about this little phrase that I've done. Whilst we were in class, the way Fort Hare was politically violent, every hour, after 3 to 4 hours, that time the Prime Minister of Ciskei was Mr. Seve. We were at the science block. People were running, the other blocks were on the upper end of the campus. They will come running from that direction. And then we were the last block towards the hostels. They would shove notices under the door while the lecturer was still busy lecturing. Or give way, Sebe and his army are here. We would all just push the door and out we ran. Because they would just come there and hit you. They didn't even care whether they hit you on the head or what, they will just do anything. That was the way what we experienced when you go to Fort Hare. It was that moment, that uncertainty, amidst confusion and turbulence, that Professor Makhene became more than a lecturer. He was a mentor, a guide, and steady hand to help us navigate not only our academics, but also wider challenges in life. He instilled in us values that became anchors, values that shaped the course of my own life. Integrity, which taught us to stand firm in truth, even when it was costly. Humility, which reminded us that greatness is never about position, but about service. Compassion, which opened our eyes to the needs of others and the importance of kindness. Steadfastness and unwavering courage, which encouraged us to face adversity with dignity and resilience. These values provided us not just with an academic foundation, but with a moral and social campus that has carried me through my entire journey. For this professor, I am profoundly and eternally grateful. On a lighter and more personal note, I cannot help but recall the times I would babysit for you and Ustoko. There are the girls today. I would babysit for you and Ustoko. Those memories remain close to my heart, reminding me not only of the academic bond we shared, but also of the warmth and trust of your family. To Mamotsa, to Modise, to Tuli and Mali, I've seen you years back. Mali, thank you for sharing your father and your home with me in those early years of my life. Your generosity extended beyond your family walls and touched many of us who found guidance and comfort under your father's influence. Today, as I reflect on those years, I see clearly how much to who I am was shaped by the lessons learned under your teaching, your mentorship, and your example. You gave us more than education. You gave us the tools to lead. Professor, we honor you, we celebrate you, and we thank you not only for the knowledge you imparted, but for the lives you have touched and transformed. Your legacy lives in us and through us. It will continue to live on. I'm going to quote something. People will forget what you once said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget. May God bless you and give you more and more years. We value you more than anything else in life. I thank you.
Let's give you another round of applause. That was wonderful. Ausmatapelo. Thank you so much for so aptly sketching out the journey that you traversed with Professor Makhene. The 70s were indeed very turbulent. And most of us who went to what we called the Bush universities, you know, the trouble that was always there with the police raiding campus, going to even the dining room to pick up the meal cards or of students that they wanted to raid. And at that time, we needed people like Professor Makhene to protect us, who were members of staff for that matter. So thank you so much for sharing with us the journey you traveled with him and all that he did, not only for you, but for the entire student body during those difficult times. Now there are UNIBO times as well. And for the UNIBO times, the early days, we're going to request Professor Simeon Taule, who was one of the first academic staff members at this university when it started in the 80s, to give us a history of how he encountered Professor Makhene. Professor Taule.
Thank you, Advocate Tlakula, Program Director. Professor Makhene and your family members present here, Professor Jobeka, Vice Chancellor, and members of the university management. University students and their leaders, university staff members, distinguished guests, ladies, Professor Khadina Bukau, and I've had the opportunity and privilege of working alongside Professor Makhene. We are gathered here to honor Professor Makhene, a former Vice Chancellor of UNIBO, a man whose dedication, perseverance, and commitment have shaped the lives of countless students and deeply impacted the lives of those who were fortunate enough to work with him at UNIBO. I feel highly honored to have been asked to make a contribution on this auspicious occasion. This colloquium offers us a rare opportunity to reflect on the legacy of Professor Makhene, while also recalling the ideals that shaped UNIBO's founding vision, ideals that remained as relevant today as they were in 1980. When he arrived here in 1980, Professor Makhene was shown plans which had been put together for the construction of the residential village, as well as plans for the main campus, including the base building. He saw the design of the staff village with houses facing in all directions and those many cults. The explanation that was given was that the design of the place was based on the way in which traditional Botswana villages were built. A few years later, when the official gowns of the Chancellor and Vice-Chancellor were first unveiled, Professor Makhene explained that the patterns on their fronts were based on the designs which Botswana women made in decorating their houses. One can see then that there was this desire for a university to make a connection with its primary constituency. As for the base building with its striking truncated pyramid, Professor Makhene told me that when he arrived, he found that there was no provision for laboratories for the science subjects that were going to be taught. Being a scientist and a man with a love for details, who paid attention to details, he insisted that laboratories should be included in the plans of the building. And so as a result, the place which was going to be a car park was closed up to make provision for 2 laboratories. UNIBO opened its doors to students for the first time in April of 1980. At that time, Professor Makhene was assistant to Dr. Jack Creel, who was the rector and vice-chancellor of the university. But within a couple of years, he was appointed to be vice-chancellor. He had been a Fulbright scholar. He had carried out research at Harvard University. He had spent many years at Forte as an academic. So with his appointment, he brought the experience and vision needed to lead this young institution through challenging times. In the early 1980s, there were not many black academics who were vice-chancellors of universities. So he was among the first, if he was not the first. His appointment was met with great approval, particularly by black academics at the university. They felt that one of their own has now achieved a high position in the university. Soon after his appointment, a few senior employees of the university invited him to a meeting. There was Professor Bob Leshwai, Professor Jake Sitsedi, there was Mr. Walter Mosetli, the assistant registrar. Unfortunately, all three have passed on. We congratulated him, I was there too. We congratulate him on his appointment and assured him of our support. He told us a little about his vision for the university, excellence in teaching. We wanted him to succeed and felt that his success was our success too. At the end of the meeting, we gave him advice and said, "You are Professor John Makhene. Please stay that way. Don't allow the assumption of power change you into a Professor Johan van der Makhene." And I think he stayed that way. The establishment of UNIBO was unique in South African higher education. It was born in the hearts of the people of Bophuthatswana, many of whom contributed varying amounts of monies towards its establishment. It was indeed a powerful statement of ownership and aspiration. UNIBO was established following recommendations of the 1977 National Education Commission, led by Dr. E.P. Lechela. There are universities in Southern Africa which started as university colleges, offering degrees of other universities like UNISA and Rhodes. And this is one of might have gone. But the Lechela Commission, which had been set up by the government of Bophuthatswana to examine existing education systems, recommended a different path. From time to time, one finds in the literature that there are calls for an African university, one that is rooted in African contexts and has a focus on relevance to the continent's needs. By recommending to the government that it should look further than the traditional model of the Western university as it existed in South African universities, the Lechela Commission aligned itself with this call for an African university. In its report, which was accepted by the government, the Commission emphasized that in addition to educating and training students, the university should be sensitive to the developmental needs of its immediate constituency, and it should address them. The university was called upon to be innovative in both its structure as well as its curriculum. Inasmuch as the university wanted to be innovative for itself, it was conscious of the fact that it was essentially part of the university system in South Africa. Its degrees had to be recognized as being of a high standard so that the graduates could be admissible to other universities for postgraduate studies. The graduates also had to be acceptable in the employment sector, both in Bophuthatswana and outside. Among the challenges to which the university had to respond was the fact that many of the Bophuthatswana secondary schools, from which the majority of the learners enrolling at the university would be coming, even though they might be in possession of matriculation exemption certificates, they would be inadequately prepared for university studies. This challenge had been faced by black students across the higher education sector and had led to low graduation rates. The challenge, therefore, was how to build an institution that was simultaneously innovative and recognized, that was African in character, yet connected to the broader Southern Africa university system, that was community-focused, yet academically rigorous. These were the challenges that would define UNIBO's formative years. The university met these challenges by acknowledging and confronting the situations from which the students came. Rather than accepting that low graduation rates are inevitable, UNIBO chose innovation to address deficiencies in the students' preparation for university study. It introduced compulsory foundation courses for all first-year students. There was communication and study skills, or CAS, which was intended to provide the students with the skills of communicating in English, the medium of instruction, so as to improve their comprehension of study material. Poor comprehension had been identified as a major contributing factor to the low pass rate among first-year students. UNIBO also placed a great premium on excellence in teaching to ensure that the students derived the maximum benefit from their lecturers. The need for interventions to help students who enter university with inadequate preparation cannot be denied. What may be up for discussion is how such intervention is to be provided. CAS was the UNIBO way of addressing the problem. The curriculum included 2 other compulsory courses: a basic mathematics course, which was designed to equip the students with computational skills they needed to function effectively in an increasingly technological and quantitatively structured environment. It was not uncommon at that time to find teachers who could not calculate the average mark of a student. The other compulsory course was development studies, which was designed to conscientize the students to development issues, and it drew insights from a variety of subjects. But by far the most transformative innovation that UNIBO introduced was that of work experience as an integral part of all degree programs, and the decision that all degrees should be professional qualifications. UNIBO had 4-year degrees in which the professional training part was included in each of the 4 years. Students were expected to spend time in real work situations relevant to their studies in each year of their study programs. And this was over and above their academic tuition time. A statement that one often had at that time was, "We don't want people with qualifications but who are functionally illiterate." The work experience, coupled with the existence of an exit with a diploma after 2 years of a 4-year degree program, was an effective innovation at a time when students often left historically black universities after 3 or 5 or even 7 years. Leave university after 2 years, provided they had passed with a professional certificate that attested to their being functionally literate. In In addition, UNIBO introduced part-time, excuse me. In addition, UNIBO introduced part-time evening classes, which were attended by many teachers, government employees, policemen, and soldiers. They came to the university to upgrade their knowledge, their skills, and their qualifications. In this way, UNIBO made good on its assignment of addressing immediate identified needs of its it succeeded in creating a good learning environment for the students. Good academic standards were achieved and recognized. The EOC, or Equal Opportunity Council, which administered scholarships for postgraduate study in the US, came to respect that UNIBO students were well prepared for graduate studies. Some of our graduates were found to be adequately prepared for postgraduate studies by well-renowned universities, such as Cambridge University in the US and Cambridge University in the UK and Yale University in the USA. UNIBO produced no less than 3 vice-chancellors of universities in South Africa. And there are countless other leaders in society who are products of UNIBO. And I think Advocate Lakula mentioned some of those graduates. Leadership is tested most when values are challenged. Perhaps nothing illustrates UNIBO's commitment to academic freedom more than the time when political authorities objected to the inclusion of communism in the development studies course and wanted communist literature banned. Guided by Professor Makhene, the university succeeded in convincing the government to leave the curriculum unchanged and not to ban communist literature. This was ethical leadership at its finest, protecting the integrity of academic inquiry, even when doing so carried significant risk. This is a lesson that even today cannot be taken for granted, as we see revered Ivy League universities in the US capitulate to government interference. The importance of Professor Makhene's role in the development of UNIBO into an institution that gained respect for the quality of its teaching and the competence of its graduates is undeniable. He was responsible for setting up the administrative structure. The various committees of the university and the reporting lines were introduced by him. Committees such as the council and its subcommittees and the Senate all had external members who were leaders in their respective fields. A look at the calendars of those formative years reveals that senior academics from places like UCT, Pretoria, Stellenbosch were also members of some of the committees. The leaders of industries which had operations in Bophuthatswana, such as the AECI, Anglo-American, Edgar's, and others, supported the university and sat on some of the committees. He negotiated with the FRD, Foundation for Research Development, before it changed to ANRF, to allow UNIBO academics to apply for research grants. And this was granted even though they had to apply through the South African Embassy. It was granted even though Bophuthatswana Bophuthatswana was supposed to be a different country. Professor Makhene recruited well-established staff from other universities to come and spend time teaching some courses, and thereby ensuring that the standards were appropriate. UNIBO had external examiners from well-established universities. He recruited young academics from other universities in South Africa, and provision was made for them to enroll for senior degrees in other universities. There were even a few who were employed and immediately sent to other universities for postgraduate studies, even before they set foot in the classroom at UNIBO. There were academics from several countries such as Lesotho, the UK, USA, and Canada. This is how the historian Professor Mbenge put it, and I quote, UNIBO attracted a variety of staff distinctly different from those found at South Africa's universities at the time. Among the people finding employment at UNIBO were a number of black non-South Africans or South African academics, including a few South African exiles returning from African states. Some, mainly British, post-colonial academics looking for new opportunities, and a number of more radical white South African academics attracted by the possibility of a more progressive and open agenda, close quote. Not all staff members believed in the UNIBO project. To some, the best way to proceed was to reproduce the institutions from which they had come. Those from Forte wanted another Forte. Those from Tafloop, likewise. To others, Bophuthatswana was an integral part of South Africa, and how dare it tries to be different. To others still, breaking ranks was a hurdle they would rather not try. Some staff members were accused of supporting apartheid by coming to Bophuthatswana, even though they were teaching black students in an altogether better learning environment compared to that which reportedly existed in some historically black universities. Now, to get a collection of such different inclinations to pull in the same direction needed a leadership with skill, with patience, and a firmness that comes from knowing exactly where UNIBO wanted to go. And Professor Makhene provided that. He had this ability of identify potential in others and a willingness to help them become the best they could be. He didn't just lead, he nurtured. He didn't just see to it that appropriate policies were created, he saw to it that a culture of respect and excellence were created. Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I wish to suggest that UNIBO, or the UNIBO story, has the following as lessons. Firstly, vision without courage is merely dreaming. UNIBO did not just imagine a different kind of university. It was built under its early leaders who rigorously defended its innovations against both internal skepticism and external pressure. Secondly, excellence and access are not opposites. The false choice between standards and inclusion has long plagued South African higher education. The UNIBO story proves that universities can maintain rigorous academic standards while actively supporting students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Thirdly, must serve their communities without being captured by them. UNIBO's responsiveness to local needs never compromised its commitment to academic freedom and intellectual inquiry. Fourthly, transformation requires building people, not just policies. UNIBO invested in human potential, identifying talent, providing opportunities, creating space for growth. And lastly, ethical leadership sometimes requires standing alone. When defending academic freedom meant confronting political authority, the UNIBO, led by Professor Makhene, stood firm. Indeed, the story of UNIBO has lessons for us. Let us learn. May the UNIBO legacy and the leadership of Professor Makhene continue to inspire future generations of leaders, scholars, and change makers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Taule, for reminding us that the story of UNIBO is very much intertwined with the life of Professor Makhene, for sharing with us his vision for this university, who are occupying important leadership positions in our country. And also to remind us that Professor Makhene withstood political interference to defend academic freedom. I think that's a very, very important issue. Because these days we see people taking easier options of being captured. They allow themselves to be captured. And these are lessons that we can learn from Professor Makhene. Also creating a university which was pan-African in outlook. It was not usual in those days to have people from Ghana, from Uganda, from Zambia, to mention a few, to be in the academic staff. And also that this university also produced Fulbright scholars. So we have a lot to be grateful for what Professor Makhene has done for us. And thank you for so eloquently capturing that history, Professor Taule. Now, one of the first students of this university is going to take us through his journey as one of the alumni of this university, Professor Sipho Siepe, who is known to most of us. I think most of you probably did not even know that he's one of the first graduates of this university, Professor Siepe.
A few years after returning from the US, I had come with colleagues from University of Massachusetts. And on a Sunday morning, while we were relaxing, reading newspapers, I saw from the corner of my eye a familiar figure. That figure was a student that I taught at the college. And the student sobriety was very questionable. It was Sunday morning, And he rushed in excitement after seeing me. And his friends, who were also not so sober, heard him exclaim that, guys, here's a man who has made me what I am today. I tried to explain to my colleagues from the US that he didn't mean that I made him a drunkard. But they said, no, we had what we had. So, program director, I'm also saying in here are the people who produced me. So I'm pleading for your sympathy that if I fail, it is because of them. Program director, Professor Tobeka, the Vice Chancellor, Professor Makhene and your family, Dr. Mukele, one of the people who is also instrumental in encouraging some of us to finish our PhDs by always nudging and telling us of asking me when am I going to finish, as if we had a contract between us, but we didn't. But the pressure I got from him was, and I've seen that I was with at university who are now professionals. Some of them are professors, South African universities. And ladies and gentlemen, it's quite an honor for me to have been asked to share with Professor Taule, who was my mentor and teacher from the first year, and who also happened to have taught a number of people who became vice chancellors in this country, and also including the vice chancellor and principal of this university, Professor Tobeka. And I'm also happy that I managed to find time to talk to him, because I was not mistaken in trying to get him from Austria to come back to South Africa. I have the singular honor of paying tribute to one of the country's unsung heroes, my former professor and Vice Chancellor, Professor Makhene. As has already been alluded, Professor Makhene is a renowned scholar, educator, and a mentor to many. And when I say many, I mean many. And driving this morning to attend this event, song, and those of us, those who were there during my time here, the song was popularized by somebody you might know called Lamont Dozier. But the song belongs to a British American band called Odyssey. It goes, I'm not gonna sing it, but it has expression that zipping up my boots, going back to my roots, to the place of my birth, back down to earth. Driving, coming here, was like going back to my roots, because this university is a place of my academic and intellectual baptism. The baptism started, as Professor Taule had indicated, with sacrifices from the people of this region. The teachers, nurses, policemen, and other professionals who agreed to collect a few rands for good use. Undergirding these sacrifices was a vision and what Obama calls the audacity of hope. The establishment of UNIBO was a concrete expression of that vision, that audacity of hope. The power of vision linked to this university and its pioneers found expression in their ability to imagine and mentally paint a desired future. The task of driving this vision fell on the shoulders of Professor John Makhene. He provided direction and motivation and was able to outstanding scholars at university and the mission of that university. What you think you become. George Bernard Shaw probably had in mind the kind of academics and leadership that found this university when he asserted that some see things as they are and ask why. I dream things that never were and ask why not. Professor Makhene was always driven by this form of can-do attitude. This kind of inspiration and attitude was later popularized by Barack Obama when he said, yes, we can. And this is the message that Professor Makhene was sending out. To understand Professor Makhene, and I'm speaking here as a student, one must step back and consider his journey before coming to the University of Botswana to be part of this pioneering group that gave concrete expression to the idea of establishing a new university in the homeland. Politically, especially for somebody like me who was a Sowetan, and who is still a Sowetan, by the way, homelands were frowned upon. It required somebody with a vision to shrug off the common misconception that other geographic parts of the country were not part of apartheid's geopolitical imagination. I would like to repeat that. It required someone with the time. In physical terms, there was no university except the idea. A close friend of mine who had studied at other universities, who had also joined me to come and register, reconsidered his plans. I, however, kept faith. I found comfort in the fact that this new university had attracted, without buildings, scholars who were luminaries in their fields. They had joined the university with the sole purpose of starting something new, unencumbered by the burdens of history and traditions. Professor Makhene was instrumental in that. I came then to realize that a university, and of course with the nudging of by Professor Taule, that the university is defined by its academic program. It is defined by its, the quality of its academics and the type of students it attracts. A university is not defined by its buildings. It was a source of pride for me when confronted in Soweto. How could I study in a Bandustan? And all I needed to do is to produce the university calendar. And when you look at the university calendar, you look at the qualifications of the academics that are there. And they were not, no university could compare the concentration of talent that was in those calendar. I did not produce a building. I produced the qualifications of the academic, of being among Professor Makhene's students. He taught us biology, the section on zoology. I said I had the privilege of being taught by him. I should correct that. I had the misfortune of being lectured by him. I should explain that. He forced us to up the game. Inasmuch as he was clear on the subject matter, he never wanted to spoon feed us. He was an engaging lecturer and professor, and they would be so excited as he delivered. And after the 45-minute lecture, we will be disappointed to discover that lecture constituted about 3 long chapters in a book. Fortunately, other professors were kind it was a case of one lecture per chapter, which made sense to us. With Professor Makhene, we were forced to study hard. Third, Professor Makhene was soon appointed to the position of the second Vice Chancellor and Principal of the university. Well, for all intents and purposes, he could be considered to have been the first Vice Chancellor, because it was under and during his leadership that the university took shape in both form and substance. The university expanded its academic provisioning. During that time, Professor Makhene oversaw or led the university to what became an accelerated infrastructure build program. In less than a few years, the university had become a center of attraction. Its students came from every corner of the country, including neighboring countries such as Lesotho, Botswana, Swaziland, and Zimbabwe. It was only during my fourth year that UNIBO's fabled infrastructure took form. The architectural designs, as Professor Taule had indicated, of UNIBO were something out of this world. It was something to behold. This was a remarkable transformation from those early years and the old where we had houses that defined university buildings. And I must say, Professor Tobeka, who came much later, he was just telling me that when I was getting my doctorate, he was doing his first year. But what I saw here is actually remarkable. But it all started with a vision of a person, of a leader who you are sitting next to. And you started well when you said, that I've seen further than the others. It is because I stood in the shoulders of the giants. So you could actually say at least your giants are still alive. Fourth, I came to know Professor Makhene as a father figure. And I think to many junior staff members, he was a mentor. Many staff members were later to indicate to me that he took it upon himself to ensure that all junior staff members were given the opportunity to upgrade their qualifications at the university's expense. This is about investing in an institution, about growing your own timber. But again, as a father figure, he would also inquire about my studies. I was among the first few students who got repeatedly invited for an evening meal at his home. Mamuta will know that, and I'm sure she'll remember that my plate will be also very clean. I felt at home. The late Miss Makhene would show equal interest in my well-being as Prof. And for that, and the family, I'll forever be grateful. Tilly was still young at the time. And may her soul rest in peace. Fifth, Professor Makhene ensured that the University of Botswana was a place of learning, not a hotbed of food protests. It turned out that some of the food protests were really academic protests by students who were unprepared to sit for examinations. To counter this, Professor Makhene introduced what we call meal vouchers. In terms of this arrangement, students were not forced to rely on the university cafeteria for their meals. If they were unhappy, they were free to buy foodstuffs from the nearby Mabatu shopping complex, which was within a walking distance. This was an innovative way of dealing with these debilitating food protests. This arrangement helped to ensure that students focus on their main responsibility, which is to study. Sixth, I will be remiss if I did not mention that the University of Botswana was founded on the principle of it being a university designed to contribute to the development of its communities. Professor Taule had elaborated fully on that. And this is what universities should be about. It should not be a place where the academics or people are so excited about having been to somewhere and they are not able to contribute to their own communities. As social institutions, they are extensions of the societies in which they are located. From the onset, UNIBO offered professional degrees. This enabled its graduates to find employment immediately after graduation. I, for one, was recruited before I even sat for my final examination. Today's students are unfortunate in that the minute they graduate, they join the ranks of the unemployed. And this is a serious indictment of our current leadership, both within and outside the university. The driving motivation behind the establishment of an institution that offers professional degrees was a central idea of development and of service to one's community. Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe could have expressed this sense of ensuring that education becomes relevant when he addressed the University of Fort Hare in 1949. And he had this to say, and this remains still important. You have seen by now what education means to us, the identification with the masses. Education to us means service to Africa. Fort Hare must be to the African what Stellenbosch is to the Afrikaner. Fort Hare must be the barometer of African thought. The important thing is that Stellenbosch is not only the expression of African thought and feeling, but it is also the embodiment of their aspiration. So also must Fort Hare express and lead African thought, unquote. In a sense, what Professor Taule was doing was to provide a further elaboration of this idea when you talk about being connected. Seventh, I owe my journey to Professor Makhene. He ensured that I got the best lecturers, got the best professors. He contributed immensely to the fact that I end up graduating in cum laude in mathematics with my bachelor's degree. No, that stuff is for the obituary. I mean, but the most important, Professor Makhene became one of my referees when I applied for the scholarship to study abroad. I was amongst the 7 out of 150 who got the Ernest Oppenheimer Memorial Trust scholarship to pursue a postgraduate studies in mathematics at Cambridge University in the UK. And it is because of him. No, before you clap, I did not take the scholarship, by the way. But it is on record that I did get it. And actually, Cambridge was surprised that I would say no to them. And I think Professor Taule and Professor Emerson were responsible for my decision to take another scholarship to go and study in the US. But what is important about that is that UNIBO was able to produce students who could compete. So when we left UNIBO, we were working high. We did not emerge out of this thinking that we are children of a lesser God. And as fate would dictate, I received another scholarship to pursue a master's degree in physics in the US. And as I said, the decision to abandon mathematics, which at the time was a bit too easy, I can only blame it on Professor Taule. And ultimately, he became also my PhD supervisor. Lastly, Professor Makhene inculcated in us a culture of respect for protocol And this I need to explain Vice Chancellor, that is the current Vice Chancellor. During his term as a Vice Chancellor and principal of this university, we couldn't barge into his office whenever we were unhappy about anything. His predecessor, Dr. Jacques Kriel, had unwittingly aided and abetted this our wayward behavior, that if we are angry, we can just go into the Vice Chancellor's office. But with Prof, we had to first engage either the Dean of Students or the Office of the Registrar. Our issues could only be escalated to his office if the other officers had failed to resolve our issues. And for me, who ultimately had a responsibility of leading a university, 7 campuses, this was a valuable lesson. The other lesson that Professor Makhene also taught us is that every time we went to see him, he'll call the registrar. And the registrar will come with our academic records. So you can imagine how embarrassing it is, even before we start talking about our issues. He says, but Sipo, you seem to have gotten an F here. But that approach was meant to make sure that we focus on our studies, because his argument was that, yes, he understands that we want to help him to run a university, but he felt that we should run our studies first. And only after we have shown that we can manage our studies, which was our primary responsibility, only then can we venture into talking about other issues. And I applied that to my students when I ran a campus and when I ran a university. And as a result, the SRC chose not to see me. As a conclusion, I want to say Professor Makhene is responsible for many of my achievements, but I should also indicate that he cannot be blamed for my failures and shortcomings. I can never thank Professor Makhene enough and his family for the support that they provided. But I would like to conclude with a statement that was Martin Luther King made, that if it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep it so well like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep it so well like Beethoven composed music. Sweep it so well like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep it so well so that all the host of heaven and earth will say, here lies a great street sweeper who did his job so well. Thank you.
That's one of the first students of this, graduates of this university. He says the university is defined by the quality of its academic programs and students it produces. Professor Siepe, you are testimony to this. Student number 220, isn't it? He is testimony to this, and thank you so much for that. I'm looking at the time, and I am also a stickler for time and time management, because we're supposed to start, with what we're here for, which is the colloquium, and we've decided to do it differently because Professor Makhene is going to be in conversation with Dr. Makhene, who is now not in the room. Now with that, I I'm scared to say you must take a break, you know, to stretch your legs, because you might be gone and you start chatting outside, and then to get you back into the room might be another problem. And we have Professor Jobeka, who has to drive back to Paris. There's an occasion in Paris. He drove to attend this occasion, and he has to drive back. So we're not going to have a break. Yeah, you had your own, yeah. So the moment that we have all been waiting for, I'm going to invite to the stage Professor Makhene, and who will be in conversation with Dr. Mokhele. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Hello, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Khotso Mokhele is my name, and I'll tell you a little bit as to why I qualified to be sitting here next to this great man. But I just want to start by saying to the family, when we had the 90th birthday party in March, and I was asked to speak as a product of Prof from Forterre, Advocate Tlakula and Professor Simeon Taule to speak as colleagues from UNIBO. We each had maximum of 10 minutes to say something. And I hope that you appreciate this opportunity for Professor Taule's very expensive sharing of his journey with Prof. Normally, during COVID, and when we were attending funerals virtually, we all lost lots of people that we valued and we cared for. And you'll sit there and watch this funeral organized by the family, and you'll realize that this family did not know this person. I can tell you that my family does not know me. They know that I go overseas a lot. I sit on these boards, but they don't know what I do there. And when I die, my funeral is going to be organized by my family, which does not know me. They know me as a brother, they know me as an uncle, but they don't know me professionally. And a day like today is a day when, especially for the family, for you to get to know who your father is professionally. You know him as a father, you know him as an uncle, as a grandfather, but today you get to know him. And this conversation that we're going to have, hopefully, will expand on your knowledge of your father. Let me start with, I told you, Prof, that I'm going to start with a bit of an apology for dragging you out here. And Modise, when we first started, Shwane is the one who, after the party in March, Shwane sent me a WhatsApp thanking me for the speech. And I said to her, wonderful as the party was, more is needed. And I'm sure for the last 2.5 hours, you appreciate because that more has come out in the last 2 hours or so. And I then spoke to Modise to say, man, I have this idea. But then I spoke to Professor Chobeka, and he had welcomed the idea and given me this team that Advocate Tlakula had spoken about that worked with us to organize this event. I spoke to Modise, I said, we have this idea. It's up to you to get the old man to sign on to the idea. And he was not particularly discouraging of me, but he raised the possibility that he may say no. And I really have to thank the family. Mamutsa, Tuli, Modise, Shwane, for getting him, because it's not in his nature to be sitting here, people saying all these things about him. That's not who he is. That's not what he did all the work for. And thank you for getting him to agree, because he absolutely, thoroughly deserves an occasion like today. With that apology, Prof, you've listened to your former colleagues, your former student. Tapi is not just your student. Dr. Moses is not just the student, but related to the family. He's spoken about babysitting for your kids and stuff. Many of us, if Professor Khadna Bukau is in the room, maybe he may be the only one who would have known you as a boy. Many of us knew you after you became a professional. Professor Siepe speaks about the kind of biology professor that you were. And I'm sure you could have shared with us some of the things that they used to say about you for doing 3 chapters in 1 lecture, instead of 1 chapter per lecture, as all the others did. We meet you, we encounter you, we draw conclusions about you, we pass judgment on you. You and I have had 6 hours of conversation together in 2 3-hour sessions. And those conversations got me to appreciate why you became who you became. Let's start there. Because in those conversations, it becomes very clear to me that your parents, your siblings, especially your brother Edward, and the high school at St. Peter's in Rosettenville were fundamental in crafting who you became. Talk to us about that.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Just talking to, don't touch anything. Just talk.
Thanks for the opportunity. Yes, indeed. my parents were very instrumental in training us and understanding that education is something to cherish, and it will help you to open the gates. Now, not only education, but even a family setting. Family is very important because it gives you the courage and the ability to be able to stand to situations. My siblings, we have a brother, a big brother, and I had a, and then,
Put the mic
yeah,
closer to my-
yes. My siblings also played a very important role. They were setting the tone, and we as younger brothers and sisters grew up knowing that we have to behave. But of course, apart from the parents and the siblings, even the members where we were, my father was staying, the community spirit also plays a very important part in shaping us. But of course, most important is the high school, St. Peter's. But before I get to St. Peter's, I must mention my dear wife, late as she's late, rather, but my dear wife, for the support that she gave me all throughout my career. And I learned a lot from her. But I can tell you one thing she taught me. You must learn to listen. And it's so true because I found it very, very useful. I can quote many instances. I think Professor Lishwai would say I was at the beginning, a very impatient vice-chancellor. But my wife, Pearl, always said to me, listen, listen, listen. And that tends to create that a level of restraint and willingness to listen to the other side before you make your pronouncement. Because when people come and talk to me about whatever issues, I'm listening to what they're saying, but I'm shooting right far ahead the outcome. But this, in other words, you still have to go through a number of stages before you get to that outcome. But I'm there in no time. So my wife helped me to listen. St. Peter's was a wonderful institution, it was a school. It was an Anglican school. And approximately half the staff was from Britain, and the other half were local South Africans. The spirit which was developed at St. Peter's, it made us feel that we are, in a sense, our own masters. We have to listen to what our teachers say, but most important, you have to integrate that into your system. That is a very important thing, because you can listen to what people are saying, but it can go in the one ear and it is out next time the other ear, gone. But at St. Peter's, it was different. The fathers, the Anglican fathers, made sure that we understand to learn, yes, but at the same time to learn how to behave and how to regard other people. So that's one thing that we learned. So St. Peter's was important, and you will see, you'll hear later that spirit of St. Peter's School, which was endangered. I can mention Father Trevor Huddleston, for instance, who used to give the South African government a lot of problems. But Huddleston was one person who could operate in a very high level, but at the same time being ready and to listen to us and invite wealthy people to come and contribute towards the school. When these wealthy South Africans come over to contribute to the school, Father Harrison would ask us, especially Walter Kingo, Stanley Tanka, and myself, to play the piano for them. Stanley was outstanding, and Walter Kingo, the outstanding piano players. And most of the items involved them. I only had one item. I was not really a musician, not at all. But we were very great friends. And that friendship, Walter Kingo and Stanley Tanka, that friendship lasted a whole life. Walter?
Let's talk a bit about that friendship, because
Yes.
from talking to you, it was more than just three boys who could play piano, just three boys who could do silly things that boys do. When Bro Walter died, I was not able to make the funeral, but my friend Karl Meiser, who's a relative of Brawali, sent me the YouTube clip. And it was 4 hours, and you gave an amazing tribute for Brawali. And that's what triggered our first 3-hour session, because I could never have connected you with Brawali. His kids are here, and his relatives are here. Brawali was a groot man, Kofote. And I bumped into Brawali again when he was at UC Berkeley, and I was at UC Davis. I have a friend here that I came with. I'm very tall and he's very short. And you and Brawali would have been the same.
Yes, it was.
Brawali was very tempestuous.
Yes.
And you were the sturdy person. You're almost like the opposites in everything. But when you describe your time at St. Peter's with Stanley Letanga and Brawali and the others, there were transformational things in you as human beings that were happening, both inside that friendship but also by the institution. You talk the vision that Professor Taule speaks about, and Dr. Mutsi and Sipho Siepe and Advocate Lakula, you talk about how the three of you at St. Peter's grappled with the issue of what's your purpose in life at that early age, in high school. Talk to us about that.
Yes. Yes, indeed. We were very good friends, but it was not just being friends and enjoying ourselves, but also how to study. And once we were in the same class, right through. But once we have studied, we want to make sure we have a discussion. If you can explain what you've read, then you have understood it. Otherwise, if you fumble, we say to you, friend, go and read. So, but then of course, the thing also is now, outside the class material, we used to talk about what is the intention after matric, what happens? And the three of us would sit and talk about what are we going to do? Stanley, of course, was the first one to talk. And Stanley would say, well, you know what? I want to be a medical doctor. Walter, Bingo. Walter was a bit uncertain, but I would jump in and say, Walter, you are so eloquent and you have such a wide, deep memory, vocabulary, and you are just outstanding when it comes to putting ideas together. In other words, synthesis, various ways in which a thing appears, but then you are able to summarize and in a nutshell, in other words. I think you do well as a lawyer. And Walter would say, Johnny, yes. And so then, of course, my turn now. They want to know what am I going to do? And I say, well, you know what? I'm not quite certain. But I've got some rough idea, which I picked up from my parents. My parents were that time when I was in St. Peter's, we were staying at Potchefstroom. My father was a reverend pastor, and they started
Of the AME Church.
Of the AME Church, yeah. And they started a night school. So I then offered to help at the night school. I was still in primary school when I offered to help. But what really attracted me to the idea was to see illiterate adults being transformed into literate fathers and mothers who could relate to their children in a better way and relate to the world around themselves. That unfolding touched me strongly. So I told my friends that it's something like that. But I don't know how I'm going to relate it to the different professions. That I don't know. So that is the connection.
And then you happen to read Abraham Lincoln's biography,
Yeah.
the three of you.
Yeah.
And there were discussions that came out of reading that biography of Abraham Lincoln.
Yes. Now, yes, there was Abraham Lincoln on the one side, and the biography, Lincoln looking at how the slaves, the African Americans, were at that time, they were called Negroes, how they were treated. And Lincoln said to himself, one day, I want to destroy this practice. And of course he did, he succeeded. But in our context at St. Peter's, Father Harrison was a very powerful, strong person and very clear-minded and very firm against apartheid in South Africa. He wrote a book, of course, called Not For Your Comfort, which actually was addressing the then government of South Africa. There are other people who made a contribution towards our way of life. There's Hugh Masekela. They were providing the social aspect of life, because you can't always be steeped in books all the time. You have to experience, have sufficient time to engage with other students. And Hugh Masekela, Gwangwa, Jonas Gwangwa, and George Makhene, all those St. Peterians. It was such a great pleasure to see people realizing their potential right on the spot. Was an encouragement. Of course, that influence of St. Peter's, we then decided, where are we going to after matric? And interesting, St. Peter's is in Johannesburg. None of us thought that, let's go to Wits. No. We wanted something which will help us continue with that approach of that discussion of our purpose in life. At first, it's a fast train. It's a fast train. It's moving very fast. And there's very little connection with the lecturers, where you can sit and talk or see them do things, and you then feel that, I can learn from there. We wanted a university where there'll be close interaction between ourselves and the staff. And fortunately for us, the Roman Catholics decided to establish a university college in Lesotho, known as Pius XII. It had just started. Walter's father was able to get some information about that, and Walter then immediately, Walter was staying in Kronstadt. Stanley and I were in Sophiatown. Walter would immediately tell us that, hey, guys, Pius XII is the place. Why? Because we'll be able to continue with our discussion. What is your purpose in life? That was our discussion. So then, of course, Walter and Stanley got admission quickly. I took time to apply, and by the time I went to apply, I was told the quota of non-Catholics has been satisfied. So we are sorry we can't admit you. So I said to my dad, Dad, I think you should go and talk to the principal. So my father said, I'll think about it. But he did go. He went from Swartown to Roma in Lesotho, talked to the principal, and my dad sent me a message whilst he was traveling back that organize yourself, you've been admitted. So that was great. You can't thank a father more than that. You feel that that's a big contribution. But of course, I knew that it's still there are other issues coming. Will he be able to raise the funds for the fees? Always a big problem.
So that, Prof, so you come out of this Anglican school, St. Peter's. As you say, half the teachers came from the UK or from outside the country. You now go into a Catholic university, which is what, 2 years old by then? 1 or 2 years old?
1 year.
That's now the National University of Lesotho, for those who don't know. It started out as part of the 12th university. And again, that institution draws a lot of its academic staff from abroad. So you remain again in this dynamic, progressive environment in Roma as you had at St. Peter's.
That's right. That was our objective. That we go to Roma, we will be able to continue that progressive approach to life. And seriousness of purpose was the most important thing. Seriousness of purpose. So, yes, indeed, we got to Roma, and ultimately, Stanley was the one who defined what he thought I should pursue. And so Stanley said, Johnny, you know what? This time we're now at Roma now. And he says, you know what? I think one day you are going to be a university principal. One day. Now, can you imagine first year BSc students? And so I said to him, Stanley, see, how do I get there? Yeah, it's a problem. So, well, we could not answer the question. But the long and short of it, Walter did succeed to be a lawyer, actually. He did. But I'll tell you more about Walter a little later. Yeah. Stanley decided that he's going to do medicine in the UK. And he was able to organize a sponsorship. And he went to UK and he became a surgeon. and it's UK.
And then, Prof, so you've told me a fascinating story about why you did not do honors in Lesotho. Let's not get into that for now. But, so Brawali ends up, so for those who don't know, Fort Hare up until 1959 was not just a black university, but it was a university for all races, because remember Fort Hare was established by the Presbyterian Church and the Church of Scotland. And like UNIBO, the starting of UNIBO, the families in the Eastern Cape contributed money for the establishment of that institution in 1917. So there were Indian students, colored students, African students, white students that could go to Fort Hare as the only black university that existed at the time. 1959, the parliament in South Africa passes what is called as the Extension of Education Act, 1959. That act tribalized African higher education. That act created Fort Hare from being an all-enrolling university. Fort Hare becomes a Xhosa university, 60. For Basotho, 60. For Basotho, Botswana, Tsongas, Vendas, and Bapedi. So this act is passed in 1959. Prof is in Roma at the time, in the dynamic academic environment of Roma. He cannot do honors in Roma for story that he told me, which I think for the purpose of this we can skip. But he goes to Fort Hare, where his brother Edward had gotten his BSc degree in zoology. But the Fort Hare that you enter in 1961 is now a tribalized Fort Hare. You come from these two dynamic schools into this tribalized institution. Talk to us about the transition.
Yes. When I got to Fort Hare, I was now a student, an honors BSc student. Stanley is gone. He's gone to England. Walter goes to Turfloop to do his law degree studies. I'm at Fort Hare. The environment, completely different, almost suffocating, intellectually speaking. But then, of course, you have to negotiate that and do your program and leave as quickly as possible. But then, during the course of the year, we were given different assignments, those who were doing honors degree. The head of the department asked me to prepare a lecture on the circulatory system, the heart, the blood vessels, and so on, and how the heart pumps in such a way that it can push and pull back at the same time. And the students found it very difficult to understand that mechanism.
No, continue, Prof.
Oh.
Continue, Prof, sorry.
So the students found it difficult, so Professor Meyring, an Afrikaner professor, said to me that I should prepare that lecture. I did that. And I was asked to give that lecture. I thought he was going to use it elsewhere. No, he said, no, I want you to go to the third year BSc students and give that lecture. I said, what? Ultimately, anyway, I went, got into the lecture theater. These are now senior students, in their third year, final year. And I start with the lecture. As I was walking around and asking students questions, say, you explain this part, you explain that part. I was not aware that the head of the department, the professor, was actually seated amongst the students. He has been listening to me all the time. So I got a shock, but then I just continued. But Professor Mering felt that he should create a post for me after honors to come and do a master's program and then on to the staff. That was his thought.
But your thoughts were different because after you finish the honors, you go to medical school.
Yeah.
And after a few years there, you realize that that's not for me.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
then you take him on that offer.
Yes.
For you to go as a
junior lecturer
at Forte.
Yeah, that's right. Now, so I took up Professor Mering, said, you remember you said to me you want me? And he said, come. So when I went to Forte,
What Professor Siepe might like to hear you say, Prof, is at St. Peter's, but particularly at Pius XII and at the medical school, you had trouble-making student leader.
yes. Well, I don't know, at Roma, for instance, in my first year, normally they call you fresher and all sorts of names. And you don't talk at student meetings. You know nothing fresher. But it so happens that we went to a first student meeting with Walter and Stanley. And we were listening to the discussions and so on. And we felt that now we can make a contribution. So Walter said, Johnny, you go first. So I went first. And to my surprise, the chairperson said, yes, John. And so I expressed my view, and the students clapped. I thought, gee, I've made it. In no time, I was in the SRC. Now, supported by Stanley and Walter. They stayed out of the SRC. Now, this role, with the Catholics, you cannot be president of the SRC if you are non-Catholic. You can't. In fact, even vice president, you can't. So, in my second year, the students elected me as secretary of the SRC. So I was in the SRC. Now, you know the sort of things the SRC do. at universities. I won't go into that.
Prof tells wonderful stories about bringing jazz bands from Sophia Town into Roma.
Yeah.
And there are very two prominent weddings that came out of girls in the buses joining the jazz bands to Roma, and some of the students there, which you shall not get into. I've just 6 hours with him. Absolutely, I have this fantastic life story of Prof. Let's go back to fourth year now. So you're back at fourth year teaching, and something fundamental happens to you at that point. You're a zoology, you did the master's degree, completed the master's degree, and you have plans to do a PhD. You've applied to the Medical Research Council for a grant. You received the grant, and the research plan is very clear. You've gone to Harvard, as Professor Siepe and I think Professor Taule said. You've gone to Germany as well, just to set you up as a research academic. But at the same time, you get transformed from being a narrowly focused research academic in zoology to a general pedagogist, to worry about general problems of student learning and the teaching that goes with it. Talk to us about that transformation, because it is that transformation that led you to your role in the founding of UNIBO.
Yes. I was a junior lecturer in 1966. And I thought, well, this is my path would be honors and do a master's degree and then a PhD. That was my line of thinking. Because once you're a master's student, once you've got a master's degree, you are likely to be promoted easily. In fact, Professor Mering said to me, if you get your master's, you will be automatically be promoted from being a junior lecturer to being a lecturer. Right. So that was the agreement. But then, somehow, I don't know how it happened, the students started talking to me. My own students, in the first place. They started talking to me about their problems, and in a way, some with social problems. And I would say to them, look, I'm just a junior person here. I can handle your issues. So it took me time to really sit down and listen to them. It was only after I got the master's degree, then I was promoted to a lectureship. Then I thought, maybe I should listen, because I was told by someone close to me that listen. So I thought, yeah, maybe I should listen. And so I would lecture physiology, embryology, and so on for students. But after that, the students would come to me and say, you know what, we have, the other people don't lecture the way you do. So I said, no, I can't entertain that, because I'll be seen as an instigator. And those were very difficult times, politically difficult times. People misinterpret you, you could be down the tubes in no time. So one had to be very careful. But anyway, To cut a long story short, I decided, let me listen. And I listened to the students complaining about how some lecturers, I'll tell you about the worst of them. One lecturer would come in and read from the textbook, right through the lecture. And when the bell goes, he closes the book and he walks out. So after listening to different stories, I then decided, yeah, I think I should do something. But I did not know what. So I thought to myself, perhaps yeah, I can't tackle this problem directly. That would be very fatal. Rather, I should investigate for the past 10 years the graduation rate of students at Forte. Graduation. So no one can point a finger at me. So I went to the administration and I spoke to the person in charge of student records, Mr. Mube. And I was surprised when he agreed. He gave me the records of students, so I was able to do an analysis of the rate, graduation rate. In other words, you do a 3-year BSc degree in 3 years. Some students were doing it in 4 years. Others were doing it in 5 years. And I found that those who do it in 3 years are only 30% of the student population. In other words, the students who have come in for the first year BSc, you follow them right through. They start dropping out, and only 30 of them pass at the end of third year. This is a really shocking finding. I decided to put it together, and I went to the Dean of the Faculty of Science, and I asked him, could he please put this on the agenda of the board? He looked at it and he said, okay, and he did. At the board meeting, I was a member of the board already. At the board meeting, here are all the professors and the senior lecturers, and he gets to this item. And the dean just poured cold water onto the idea. So it was dead. So it did not happen at that time.
And then, but somehow the rector, Professor Divet, who expelled me from Forte a couple of years later, in 1976, but he gets to pick up this idea of yours and invites you to run with that project of looking at teaching and learning at university.
Yeah, yes. Before the rector of the university called me, I then decided to cool it off, concentrate on your PhD work. So I took leave, study leave, and went to Bonn University to work with Professor Pikaski on the immunology of bilharzia. From there, then I went to Harvard University, and there I was working in the Department of Immunology on the immunology of bilharzia. When I returned after my study leave, Professor Divet, the rector, called me. And I went to his office and he said to me, look, I'd like to appoint you as a warden of one of the residences. There's a new residence coming on, and I would like you to go and provide all the necessary facilities for the residents. And it will be, in the first year, it will be occupied by women students. And then the second year, a look will be ready for the women students. So, and I said to the rector, no, I'm sorry, I'm not keen to be a warden. I have applied to the Medical Research Council in Cape Town. They have approved my research project for a PhD. I've submitted that, and that's what I want to do. And I will have sufficient funds to appoint an assistant who can come and work with me. And the principal said, if you refuse, put it in writing. And I knew I'm in this trouble. So I had to agree. Now, then something else happens. He says to me, you take charge of the East Campus. It's empty. And the women students are coming in 3 months' time. It must be fully running residence. Every facility is completely empty. You can imagine how much time it took. And as a result, my head of the department, my substantive appointment, the head of the department could hardly ever see me. I would come in and give a lecture and go out quickly because I've got a big project outside the department. And he didn't like the idea. And he therefore decided to write me a nasty letter. Now, that's the head of the department. He was trying to get rid of me. So I decided now, what do I do? I went to the dean. The dean who threw out my research project. I went to the dean, and the dean said, no, look, I was still Mr. Makhene at that time. Look, Mr. Makhene, just ignore the head of your department. Just ignore him. Which I did, of course.
Prof, there's people in here that you used to chase out of women's rooms at the East Campus. I'm not going to say which table they're sitting at, but a few of them are here. Yeah, that used to cause you trouble in Mzana at the East Campus there. But again, just to be historically complete, this residence that Prof became the warden of became available to Forte after the expropriation without compensation of the Federal Theological Seminary in Alice by the South African government. After 1974, when I arrived at Forte in 74, the seminary was next door. Musala was a first-year student at the seminary in 1974. Reverend Kubule was there. Stanley Mohoba was lecturer at the seminary. Desmond Tutu used to teach at that seminary. And the government expropriated that whole infrastructure of the Anglican Church, Methodist Church, Presbyterian Church, and Congregational Church, and handed that incredible infrastructure to Forte. That became the East Campus residence of Forte. Prof, I'm looking at the time. Let's transition now into, Professor Taule and Siepe have spoken so eloquently, and Advocate Lakula, about your role here and your transformative role here. As one of the founders of UNIBO, you are not the first rector and vice chancellor, but you became one almost a year and a half, less than 2 years after the institution had been established. And Professor Taule covered many of the things that you and I would have spoken about how unique UNIBO became. And so did Professor Siepe, that it was not just establishing an institution, you're establishing a unique institution. And they covered that, I think, sufficiently well. And you were there in the genesis of the thinking. After the Butazwana Commission that was chaired by Professor Lechela, as Professor Taule has indicated to us. Give us your version of the construction of this unique institution, influenced you by this experience that you've had coming from St. Peter's and Roma and Forte, and now you come here to become of the initial DNA of a very unique institution.
Yes. The remit was very clear that it has to be a unique institution, but at the same time, it has to function in an African setting. Now, just before I joined the university, the commission had advertised for ideas. So what I did was, I saw this in the paper, and I decided to write my idea of how the university can become an African university, but at the same time maintain the academic excellence which is expected of it. The ideas expressed in that paper captured the imagination of the commission, and as a result, I was encouraged to apply for a senior position. Now, that senior position was offered. Firstly, it was in a strange way. I was going to become the assistant to the rector. In other words, the council will appoint a rector, but I should be the assistant to that rector. I turned it down. I said, sorry, not interested. The next thing, then I got a phone call from Professor Peter, I forgot his surname now. But anyway, a professor at Wits University who was serving on the council of UNIBO. And Peter Hunter is his name, Peter Hunter. Peter Hunter said, said to me, Mr. Makhene, I would like to see you. Can you please come up to Wits and we can have tea together? He then offered me, he's serving on council. He's serving on, the council authorized him to offer me a professorship in biology. So I said to him, I'll think about it. After the tea, I said, I'll think about it. Then I phoned my friend, Walter Tringo. Said, Walter, how are you, friend? I told Walter, and Walter said, Johnny, take the post. You know what? I see it as a stepping stone. I said, stepping stone where to? Anyway, ultimately then I took the post, professor of biology, but then the chairman of council, Dr. Hudson, said, we'd like you to be in charge of all the sciences, chemistry, physics, biology, and so forth. So I said, all right, that's fine. And then the third offer came. We would like you to be assistant to the rector. So it's coming back. You start. So I said, as long as that's not my substantive post, it's okay. Right. So an assistant offers assistance which can be accepted or rejected. So I said, that's how I'm going to operate. Anyway, Dr. Kriel was appointed the first rector, but unfortunately, he could not continue. After 1.5 years, because of ill health, he resigned. But by then, I had to act as assistant to the rector. But ultimately, I was appointed the vice chancellor. Well, I did not like the word rector. You know, it belonged, in South Africa, it belonged to the Afrikaner universities. The English universities use the word principal. But then I decided that to write the statutes of the university, but I was assisted, helped by Professor Vichas at UNISA, because I'm not a lawyer, so I had to get assistance from outside, from the legal aspects. So I accepted the post, but then, of course, the thing is, Dr. Kriel was not very free to come to me because he probably felt that calling me now and then would show that he's probably not, he doesn't know what he's doing. So, but then, of course, things were getting really bad. It so happens that South African universities, when I was appointed, I had already changed the statutes and did away with the word rector. So I was appointed vice chancellor in conformity with the English-speaking universities. But then at that stage, Dr. Kriel resigned, right? And I came in and I found what are the problems I'm inheriting. One of them was that the South African universities were saying they are not going to recognize communication studies because it is a skill program. It's not an academic program. So I thought, oh my God, just a couple of days in this office, here's a problem now. But then, of course, I remembered that I know a lecturer, Sarah Murray, at the Reading University who is a specialist in special English. So I got in touch with Sarah Murray and said to her, look, Sarah, I'd like to appoint you to introduce special English at UNIBO. She came ultimately. I appointed her on the staff, and the South African universities then were very happy with the change. Special English they accepted, but communication studies skill, it was a skill. It belongs elsewhere, not the academic world. So there are other problems, of course, which I inherited from Professor Krill. Those were quite easy to manage, but I can mention one of them. My professor of economics, who was from Stellenbosch, he was saying that they don't want the subject development studies. So now I'm seated with a professor who's not prepared to handle development studies. How do I advise Senate and Council? I decided to go to Roma to visit, because Roma had development studies. I had no idea what is development studies. When you're Vice Chancellor, it does not mean you know and understand all these subjects. No. So I went to Roma and quickly got to know what development studies is all about. So when I had a Senate meeting at UNIBO, I told them about this, and they passed the resolution confirming the offering of development studies. So the courses that were troublesome were removed, and the South African universities, I visited Wits, University of Cape Town, University of Natal, the vice chancellors of these three universities. I visited them various issues, but I knew that if I get their support, the rest will follow suit, right? Which is exactly what happened, of course.
Prof, attracting the caliber of, Professor Siepe and Professor Taule speak about the Bantustan check. Clearly, Professor Siepe is very sensitive about that matter. I was in graduate school in the US at the time, when UNIBO was being established. But even those of us who were in the US got to know that there's something very dynamic happening in Makhene. There's this new institution that has just been established. It is attracting best academics, not only from throughout this country, but from abroad as well. And, you know, literally overcoming what would otherwise have been the burden of a Bantustan institution. I mean, it became, before UWC became progressive, UNIBO was progressive, right? Before UWC and UDW. How were you able to recruit and attract that caliber of staff that made students feel like if they were asked about UNIBO, they would show the prospectus? Said this is the quality of stuff that we have. Case closed. How were you able to recruit and retain and attract that caliber of staff?
The section known as Human Resource Department was in my office. It resided in this head.
Yeah. Very critical, very critical.
Yeah. Human resource department was in this head. I had to make sure that I appoint people in the first place. They should accept the ethos of the institution, the values that we were expounding, right, and the vision that we have.
I don't know why they changed the microphone. It was working quite well, but somebody decided it's not working. Why was it changed? Battery. Okay, try this one, Prof. Let's just talk. It's on.
So,
No. Okay, let's go with that one again. Okay, let's try it again.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what.
Okay, maybe I should hold it closer.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. The appointment of staff was very critical, right? And I wanted to maintain a balance between local staff and the international staff I was attracting. Because, in other words, in my head is this, as far as staffing is concerned, like at St. Peter's, like at Roma, right? And not only staff, but also attracting students from other neighboring countries. So I would plan a new department and start looking for suitable people even before we advertise. By the time we advertise, I've already spotted a number of people that I could encourage to apply. Right. So I think that was the only way in which you can ensure that you bring in people who will just dovetail with the concept of a unique university.
We're getting closer to the end. What are you most proud of in your whole life?
Very difficult question. Well, I think I probably look at it this way. As a 16-year-old St. Peterian student, and I had this idea that perhaps I can do what my parents were doing at Potchefstroom, helping young people, helping them to unfold their potential, helping people unfold their potential. So, now, at UNIBO, and I wanted to achieve it within the realm of, as a beacon of academic excellence in Southern Africa. So in other words, the university is a university in Africa, has to recognize that, but within the realm of academic excellence. Because anything less than that is no good.
When you look at what's happening in higher education in this country right now, what thoughts go through your mind?
I think one of the biggest problems which I see is that students, the graduation rate or successful graduation rate of students is very low. I was shocked when I heard about 2 weeks ago that it's still 30% graduate in 3 years, compared to the time during my time at Fort Hare.
In the 60s.
During my time, well, the research was done in 1972.
Okay.
Yeah. In 1972, I found that 30% of the students graduate in 3 years. And I was shocked when last week, a week or two passed, that it's still the same today. So that tells me one thing, which we realized, of course, at Unibo. The problem is reading comprehension. In other words, the students, they fail to organize their time. Time management is a problem. For young people coming from matric, going to university in residence, time management is a problem. They wake up normally in September and they hope to cover the work of the whole year because they've been playing around socially, yes. But then, of course, what catches them is that reading comprehension. They read, but they don't comprehend. They read, they don't integrate into their minds. It's not memorizing. It is not. The reading comprehension also requires critical thinking. Now, I tell my students, the university, purpose of a university is not so much to teach you mathematics or physics or chemistry, but in actual fact, the purpose of a university is to help you to think, to critical thinking is the crucial denominator in all this.
You must have some regrets in the 90 years of your life. What would you single out as your biggest regret?
Oh, that's a very simple one. I regret that I wanted, at Unibo, I wanted to establish a school. I managed to establish a school of nursing, and I wanted to establish a school of public health. Now, a school of public health will look after, in other words, prevention methodologies in the townships before people become critically ill. Now, I wanted to establish that school, but unfortunately, I did not have enough time. I ran out of time. Because in other words, I was getting to the end of my term as Vice Chancellor. So I approached Professor Tobias at Wits. He was the Dean of Medical School. Yeah. And I was trying to get him to establish such a school. But that did not catch on.
Prof, your feeling about today, I know you're very apprehensive about what today was all about. How do you feel now?
Great.
For me, it's been an amazing privilege to have the time that we spent together. And Mamotswa, thank you very much for the tea and the coffee and the biscuits and the cakes and everything that you always provide. We talk about people. Professor Sepe is already telling us what's going to be in his obituary. He's already thinking about what will be said after he dies. We seldom celebrate transformers when they still live amongst us. You are amazing in so many ways. Many of people today have been remarking about how your back is still as upright as it was when I first saw you at Forte in 1974. We know when you arrived at Forte in the Faculty of Science, those type people will know this, and Arthur Antoine. Not those sitting there in economics and other public administration and so forth. When you arrived at Forte and you're in the Faculty of Science, you'd be told that if you take zoology, Makhene is there. You better be prepared to go work. You were known for excellence. Even then, it was terrifying, Professor Sepe. It was terrifying to be taught by Professor Makhene because you knew you are not going to cut corners. You knew you had to work. And it's been amazing for me to hear you explain how you became who you became, which makes me explain why you should drive us so hard as students, because you've always been a person that believes in excellence and hard work and affirmation and commitment is fundamental. As I understood that, I finally forgave you for being the terrifying lecturer at Forte. I feel like I've come to know you very well, and I hope that our conversations will continue. I still think that a dedicated piece of work, when you and I can talk about it. I think a book has to I think a book to celebrate this life has got to be written. There aren't many in this country, Bismarck. Oh, Professor Jobek, sorry for it. There aren't many lives in this country that have been as transformative as this life has been. And I think for future generations, let this colloquium be that launching platform for what will be and we'll find the funding for it. We'll find the money for that book to materialize. And in fact, Professor Jobeka, when I phoned you, the book was my goal. The colloquium was just a platform, just to launch the conversations about Prof. Makhene and to celebrate. We're lucky that he's still with us now at 90. Prof, so the conversations between you and I will continue, but they will mutate into conversations about what I think should be a proper scholarly put together book on your transformative journey and the lives that you've transformed and enriched. And it's been a privilege for me. And thanks to the family, it's been an absolute privilege to spend the time that I've spent with you. Thank you very much.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much to everyone who has come to this colloquium. And So I just wish to express my gratitude to all the members who attended this colloquium, and I thank you very, very, very much. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chancellor will now hand to Mr. Manoku, if you can please come up as well. Over to the Vice Chancellor now.
Thank you very much, Professor Makhene. And once again, would like to thank Professor Makhene and his family for making sure that the dream that Ntate Khotso Makhene had in mind became a reality. It has now become part of our story and our dream. And I am very notorious of making outlandish announcements and commitments on behalf of the university. But Professor Makhene and Professor Siepe, let's put it on record today that the university will also do its part towards making sure that that book becomes a reality. So at this point, the university has prepared a very special gift for you, Prof. So this is the time. They have not told me what it was. So me and you are going to be surprised. So may you please stand?
Sure.
So apparently, this is what it is. Does it look like you? Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good. Thank you.
I guess you wonder where I've been. I searched to find the love within.
Thank you, Iggy. Yeah, what a day. I was immersed in the discussion. I forgot there is a phone. I forgot I must check messages or anything like that, and I'm very proud of that because this was and is an important discussion. Thank you very much, Program Director, Advocate Pensi Tlagula, and warm greetings, everyone. For that special discussion, thanks, Vice Chancellor, Prof. Chobeka. Thanks, Dr. Makhene, for mobilizing us to have this discussion. And there are, of course, projects that are coming out of it. And I want to be part of that. My job at the Northwest University include alumni relations and fundraising. More about that later. We are the most fortunate and blessed people to share this space with a legend here today, Professor John William Mukoni Makhene, one of the founding fathers of our university. He is therefore part of our heritage. We respect that September is Heritage Month in our country, and we joined millions of South Africans and South Africans in the diaspora to celebrate our history as a country and a people. However, we know that we must celebrate our origins and history every day. And that is why we are here today, celebrating this institution, Prof. Makhene. We are very grateful that we are part of your story, and we salute you. As I said, he is one of our founding fathers, and therefore this occasion can be seen as an intentional act or response to the 5th commandment in the Bible. Honor your father and mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God has given you. Tlotla rrago le mmago gore malatsi a gago a nne mantsi mo lefatsheng le morena modimo wa gago a go fileng. This, ladies and gentlemen, is about sustainability. And for us to be sustainable, we must draw on the servant leadership, work ethic, and wisdom of Prof. Makhene and his contemporaries to achieve success and sustainability. Reference was made to the efficiency of the organizing team, and a few of us may link that to the now, not linking it to the ethos that Prof. Makhene has planted. It is a continuing journey, and we hope that our students and those who come after us will continue on this journey. Many of us here are staff and former students of this university, meaning this university is our alma mater. This phrase, alma mater, simply translates to a nourishing mother. Our mother. And in African culture and tradition, we know that when children grow, they take care of their parents and the family homestead. We can therefore take care of this university, or at least be part of it. How do we do that? We can start our own alumni chapters wherever we are, or the fields that we find ourselves, become mentors of the current students, and becoming members of convocation, which, by the way, you can join by paying a once-off 100 rands. Remember, I said I'm also responsible for fundraising, but that's not the story here today. We are here, of course, to thank the Principal and Vice Chancellor, Prof. Jobeka and Dr. Mokhele, for mobilizing us. We thank Dr. Matapelo Motse for bringing insights and the journey, experiences, encounters from our sister university, University of Fort Hare. We already have that chapter, Birth of UNIBO, that we heard from Prof. Simeon Taule. The chapter is almost edited. I think we are ready for it. And yes, the products or alumni of the university represented by Prof. Siposiepe. These are, I think he said his student number is 220, yeah. So that student number, I think, taking into account that today we have more than 56,000 students, it's of great significance. It's part of our journey. Thanks to the organizers, both internally within the university and friends and acquaintances of Prof. Makhene. But most importantly, thank you, Prof. Makhene. We really are blessed to have you here. And the family for not only persuading him to be with us here today, but sharing him with the rest of South Africa and the world. It will be a loss for us not to capture some of these experiences and lessons for future generation. Ladies and gentlemen, re a leboha. Oh, okay. Now I'm deployed as the program director. Okay, so there will be some lunch served in the restaurant. Outside, you turn to the left. There will be people, colleagues will show you where that is. Then there will be an event. We called it a networking dinner because that is where I think the stories of the past must come together as well as we share also some of those other chapters in the book, starting at 5. So we don't have much time for the tour, but some people will be going on the university tour to really see, well, what we saw here is still there, and indeed the university still exists. So let's meet at lunch and at 5. Thank you very much, everyone. May you enjoy your afternoon.